All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're talking about something huge, one of the biggest, most long-term decisions any company will ever make, and that's designing its supply chain network. Now, this isn't just about, drawing a few lines on a map. We're talking about building the entire backbone of a business. It's a choice that can set a company's costs and what it's capable of for 10, maybe even 20 years.
I mean, think about it in your own life. Have you ever wondered how that package you ordered just shows up at your door so incredibly fast? Or why no matter when you go, your favorite snack is always right there on the shelf? It's easy to take for granted, but trust me, behind all that convenience, there's this incredibly complex, super carefully planned system at work. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. You see, it's not magic, not at all. It's really a strategic blueprint. It's the end result of these massive, high-stakes decisions where companies are constantly juggling cost, speed, and risk. In fact, you could say it's the physical proof of a company's entire strategy. All right, Section 1, the blueprint of business. So what is supply chain network design really? Well, at its core, we're talking about the physical setup, the infrastructure of the entire supply chain. It's the who, what, and where of how a company actually gets things done. And scale is everything here. Let's look at two totally different examples. On the left, you've got a local bakery, maybe in Mississauga. Its entire network might just be one building where they bake and sell. Super simple, right? But then on the right, you've got a huge national retailer like Mountain Equipment Co-op. Now they have a much bigger puzzle to solve. They have to figure out where to put all their stores, their giant distribution centers all across the country to serve millions of people. Both are network design problems, but they're playing in completely different leagues. So what this all boils down to are a few absolutely critical questions that every business leader has to answer. Things like, how many facilities, plants, warehouses do we actually need? Where should we put them? How big should they be? And what's the specific job of each one? How are products going to flow between them? Answering these questions, well, that's what locks in your costs and what you can promise your customers for years to come. If you get it right, you've got a serious competitive edge. But if you get it wrong, you're in for a tough time. Okay, so moving on to the influencing forces, the factors that shape the network. And of course, you're not making these big decisions in a bubble, right? There are all these forces both inside and outside the company pulling you in different directions. So let's take a look at what those key factors are. I like to think of this as the strategist's dashboard. You've got all these dials you need to watch. First up, your own strategic goals. Are you trying to be a low-cost leader like Walmart? Then you'll need massive, super efficient hubs. Or maybe you're all about speed, like a medical supply company that needs to be close to hospitals. Then you add in what your competitors are doing, big picture economic stuff like tariffs under CUSMA, the trade agreement between Canada, the US, and Mexico, and even the quality of the local infrastructure. Is it near a major highway like the 401 in Ontario? Every single one of these things changes the final picture. And this leads us to a classic trade-off, cost versus service. Imagine this. You could build just one giant distribution center for all of Canada. Your facility and inventory costs would be way lower. But think about shipping something from, say, Toronto all the way to Vancouver. Your transportation costs would be huge and it would be slow. The other option, you could build 3 smaller regional centers, one for the West, one for Central, and one for the East. Now, your building costs are higher, but you're much closer to your customers. That means shipping is cheaper and way faster. The real trick is finding that perfect balance, that sweet spot that keeps your total costs as low as possible while still delivering the speed your customers expect. So you're probably wondering, with all these competing factors, how on earth does a company actually make a decision without getting totally overwhelmed? Well, there's a process for it. They use a structured framework that helps turn all that complexity into a clear step-by-step plan. And this is what that framework looks like. It's a 4-phase process that moves from the big picture down to the tiny details. So step 1, you define your strategy and constraints. What are we actually trying to do here? Then, step 2, you start thinking regionally. For that national retailer we talked about, maybe this means 1 DC for Western Canada, 1 for Central, 1 for the Atlantic. After you figure that out, you move to step 3, where you pick desirable sites within those regions. Okay, for our Central Canada DC, should it be in Mississauga or Brampton? And then finally, step 4 is where you make the final choice. You pick the exact piece of land and figure out exactly which stores it's going to supply. See how each step just builds right on top of the last one? It's a really logical flow. All right, let's switch gears a bit and look at the delivery playbook and the different distribution models for this modern world. We're going to focus on that last, crucial step, actually getting the product into the customer's hands. And let me tell you, the rise of e-commerce has totally changed the game here. It's created a whole new set of rules and models for how this gets done. So here's a quick comparison of some of the big ones. You've got dropshipping, which you see with companies like Wayfair. The amazing thing here is the retailer holds zero inventory. Then you have last mile delivery. Think of grocery chains like Loblaws. It's super fast, but man, is it expensive. And then there's customer pickup. IKEA is the master of this. They basically get you to do the final, most expensive part of the delivery. As you can see, every single one of these models is a different kind of trade-off between cost, speed, and how much control you have. Okay, let's zoom in on one of these models that I am positive every single one of you has used. It's called Click and Collect, or what we call BOPIS in the industry. That stands for Buy Online, Pick Up in Store. The idea couldn't be simpler. You place the order online, and then you go to a physical store to pick it up. And this model has absolutely exploded in popularity, and for some really good reasons. First, it uses the retailer's existing stores like a network of mini distribution centers. For you, the customer, that means you can get your stuff super fast if it's in stock. It saves money on shipping for both you and the retailer. And, this is the big one for the retailer, it gets you to walk into their physical store. And once you're in there, hey, you might just buy something else, right? It's a huge part of the strategy for companies like Best Buy Canada and Canadian Tire. Okay, so now let's zoom out and look at the global chessboard. We're talking about designing international supply chains. Because for a lot of Canadian companies, the supply chain definitely does not stop at the border. And when you're designing a network on a global scale, well, it's kind of like playing a really high-stakes game of chess. Every single move you make has these big, complicated consequences. And for a long time, one of the main moves in this global chess game was offshoring. This is pretty straightforward. It's when you relocate a part of your business, usually manufacturing, to a distant country where costs are a lot lower, say from Canada to Vietnam. This has been the go-to strategy for tons of electronics and clothing companies for decades. But the game is definitely changing. We're seeing some major strategic shifts. Because of all the risks that come with having your supply chain stretched all over the world, companies are looking at nearshoring. That's where you move production closer to home, maybe from Asia to Mexico, to get a better balance of cost and speed. And then there's an even bigger move called onshoring. That's where you bring the whole operation right back to your home country, back to Canada in our case, to get way more control and make your supply chain tougher. And this table of key risks really shows you why this is happening. The decision isn't as simple as just finding the cheapest place to make something anymore. You've got to think about geopolitical risks, like sudden tariffs. You have to worry about major disruptions, like a natural disaster or a pandemic shutting everything down. And honestly, just the simple fact that a supplier on the other side of the planet can't react quickly when your customer demand suddenly changes. A network that looks cheap on paper can turn into a super high-risk one overnight. And you know what? We have a perfect, happening right now example of this right here in Canada. Just look at the huge investments Ford, Stellantis, and GM are making to build a brand new electric vehicle battery supply chain right in Ontario. That is a massive onshoring strategy in action. What they're doing is securing a critical technology for the future, cutting their reliance on faraway suppliers, and building a much stronger, more resilient network for the next wave of manufacturing. Okay, so that brings us to our strategic takeaway. We've gone from local bakeries all the way to global EV supply chains. After looking at all that complexity, what's the final blueprint? What's the big idea you should walk away with? Here it is. The most important thing to remember is that a well-designed and adaptable network is fundamental to navigating the complexities of modern commerce. It's not a set-it-and-forget-it kind of decision. The world is always changing. So a great network isn't just about being efficient today. It's about being flexible and tough enough to handle whatever disruptions tomorrow throws at it. And that leaves us with one last big question for you to think about as you start your own careers. For decades, the main goal was always to build the cheapest supply chain possible. But now, in a world full of disruptions, pandemics, trade wars, constant change, is the cheapest supply chain really the smartest one anymore? Or has resilience, the ability to bounce back, become the new, most valuable thing in business?